The night was quiet, the city lights reflected softly on the tinted glass of the black limousine parked outside a luxury restaurant. Inside, the air was thick with silence. Richard Hayes, one of the most successful CEOs in the city, sat alone in the back seat, staring at the wedding invitation resting on his lap. His best friend had just gotten married, and while the world celebrated love, he felt nothing but emptiness. For all his billions, awards, and luxury, he had no one waiting for him at home. He sighed, leaned back, and instructed his driver to take him home. But as the car turned onto the next street, something unexpected happened. Through the rain-smeared window, he saw a little girl standing on the sidewalk, clutching a small teddy bear, her dress soaked, and her eyes full of tears. "Stop the car," Richard ordered quickly. The driver hesitated for a second before pulling over. Richard stepped out, his polished shoes splashing in the puddle, and walked toward her. "Hey, are you all right?" he asked softly. The girl looked up, her voice trembling. "My mommy, she's sick. I was looking for help, but everyone just walked past me." Her innocence pierced through the walls around his heart. Without thinking, Richard knelt and said, "It's okay. I'll help you. Where do you live?" She pointed down a dark alley, and Richard followed, his expensive suit brushing against the cold walls. When they reached a small, broken-down apartment, he found her mother lying weakly on an old couch, coughing painfully. "Sir," she whispered, "I'm sorry, she must have wandered out." "I didn't mean," but before she could finish, she fainted. Richard immediately called an ambulance. As the paramedics arrived and took the woman away, the little girl clung to his hand, refusing to let go. "Please don't leave me," she whispered. Something inside him cracked open that night, something he hadn't felt in years. At the hospital, while the doctors treated her mother, Richard sat beside the little girl in the waiting area. She looked at him curiously, her big brown eyes studying his face. "You look sad," she said out of nowhere. "Why?" He smiled faintly, "Maybe because I'm lonely." The girl tilted her head and whispered, "You need a wife, and I need a dad." Her words hit him harder than anything ever had. He didn't know how to respond, so he just sat there in silence, staring at the tiny soul who had unknowingly touched the deepest part of his heart. The doctors later informed him that the woman would recover but needed rest and proper care. When she woke up, she was startled to see a stranger in an expensive suit sitting beside her. "I'm the man who helped your daughter," Richard explained. "Don't worry, she's safe." Tears welled in her eyes as she thanked him over and over. He offered to cover her medical bills, but she refused. "I can't accept charity," she said weakly. "It's not charity," he replied gently. "It's humanity." Over the next few weeks, Richard couldn't get them out of his mind. He visited the hospital regularly, bringing food, medicine, and even toys for the little girl. Her name was Lily. Every time he came, she would light up the whole room with her laughter, telling him stories about her dreams and her teddy bear named Mr. Buttons. Slowly, the cold CEO began to smile again, something his employees hadn't seen in years. When her mother, Emily, was finally discharged, Richard offered to drive them home. As they stood in front of their old apartment, he looked around and said quietly, "You can't stay here. It's not safe." Emily looked down, embarrassed. "I know, but it's all we can afford." Without another word, he handed her a card. "Call this number tomorrow. I have an empty apartment in one of my buildings. You can stay there until you find something better." She hesitated but finally nodded, whispering a thank you. Days turned into weeks. Richard began spending more time with them, sometimes taking Lily to the park, sometimes bringing groceries or fixing things around the new apartment. It was strange, even to him, how natural it felt. The girl who once stood alone in the rain now sat on his shoulders, laughing as he spun her around. For the first time in years, he felt something more powerful than success, he felt love. One evening, Emily invited him for dinner. It was simple, homemade pasta and salad, but it felt warmer than any five-star meal he'd ever had. After dinner, Lily brought out a drawing she had made. "Look," she said proudly. It showed three people holding hands under a big heart. "That's Mommy, that's me, and that's you, Mr. Richard." He smiled, but before he could say anything, she added softly, "You need a wife and I need a dad. So maybe, we can share?" Emily's face turned red, and she tried to apologize, but Richard just laughed gently. "Maybe your daughter is wiser than both of us," he said. That night, as he drove home, Richard couldn't stop thinking about what Lily had said. For years, he had chased success, thinking it would fill the emptiness inside. But now, a little girl's innocent wish had shown him what he had truly been missing. Months later, Richard hosted a small charity event at his company. Emily and Lily were there, smiling proudly as he spoke about helping single mothers and children in need. When the event ended, Lily ran to him and hugged his leg tightly. "Did I do good, Daddy?" she asked sweetly. Everyone froze for a moment, but Richard didn't correct her. Instead, he lifted her in his arms and smiled. "You did perfect, sweetheart." Emily's eyes glistened with tears as she watched them. That night, as they stood together under the stars, Richard finally found the courage to speak his heart. "Emily," he said softly, "you and Lily have given me something I thought I'd lost forever, a reason to live, a reason to love." She looked up at him, speechless. "I don't know what the future holds," he continued. "But I know I want to face it with you, both of you." And with that, the man who once sat alone in his limousine, surrounded by wealth but starved of love, found a family in the most unexpected place. Sometimes, it only takes a child's innocent whisper to heal a heart that's forgotten how to dream. And for Richard, those simple words, "You need a wife, and I need a dad," became the start of a new life, one filled not with luxury, but with love. The city was quiet that night, the kind of stillness that wraps around you when everyone else has gone home and you're the only one left awake. Inside a sleek black limousine parked near the edge of a luxury hotel, Richard Hayes sat in silence, staring blankly at the glowing city lights outside his window. He was a man who had everything people dream about: money, success, power, and respect. Yet behind his polished shoes and tailored suit, there was a loneliness that no amount of wealth could ever fill. He had just left a grand wedding reception, surrounded by laughter and love, but all it did was remind him of what he didn't have. He sighed heavily and loosened his tie, instructing the driver to take him home. As the car rolled down the glistening streets, something unusual caught his attention. Through the window blurred with rain, he saw a small figure standing alone on the corner of the street, a little girl, no more than 7 or 8, holding a tattered teddy bear in one hand and shivering in the cold night air. Richard frowned. "Stop the car," he said sharply. The driver hesitated but obeyed. Richard stepped out into the drizzle, his expensive shoes splashing in a puddle, and walked toward her. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly, crouching to her level. "Where are your parents?" The girl looked up with frightened eyes. "My mommy's sick. I went to get help, but nobody stopped." Her voice cracked with fear, and for a moment, Richard felt something stir deep inside him, a feeling he hadn't felt in years: compassion. "Don't worry," he said gently. "I'll help you. Where do you live?" She pointed down a narrow alleyway, her little fingers trembling. Without hesitation, Richard took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. Together, they walked through the dark passage until they reached a small, broken-down apartment building. The paint peeled off the walls, and the air smelled of damp and dust. Inside, her mother lay on a worn-out couch, pale and unconscious. "Mommy," the girl cried, rushing to her side. Richard quickly checked her pulse. It was weak but steady. He pulled out his phone and called an ambulance immediately. Minutes later, paramedics arrived and rushed the woman to the hospital. Throughout it all, the little girl clung tightly to Richard's hand, her eyes filled with worry. When they reached the hospital, she wouldn't let go. "Please don't leave me," she whispered, and something inside him melted completely. He sat with her in the waiting room while doctors treated her mother. The hospital's fluorescent lights flickered, and the sound of footsteps echoed through the halls. Richard, who usually hated waiting, didn't mind this time. He looked at the little girl sitting beside him, her teddy bear hugged tightly against her chest. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Lily," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's a beautiful name," he said. "You know, Lily, you were very brave tonight." She smiled weakly and tilted her head. "You look sad," she said innocently. "Why?" Richard froze for a moment. He didn't expect the question. "I guess. I'm lonely," he admitted quietly. She looked at him for a long moment before whispering words that would stay with him forever. "You need a wife, and I need a dad." The simplicity of that sentence hit him like lightning. No one had ever said anything so pure, so honest, and it cracked open something inside him that he thought had died long ago. He didn't know what to say, so he just smiled faintly and said, "Maybe we both need a little family." Hours later, the doctor informed them that Lily's mother would be fine but needed rest and care. When she woke up, she was shocked to find her daughter sitting beside a stranger in a suit. "I'm the one who helped your daughter," Richard explained softly. "She's safe." Tears filled the woman's eyes as she thanked him again and again. Her name was Emily. She tried to apologize for the trouble, but Richard waved it off. "You don't need to apologize for needing help," he said. "We all do sometimes." Before leaving, he paid her hospital bills quietly and slipped away, but something about that little girl's words kept echoing in his mind. The next day, he found himself back at the hospital. Lily's eyes lit up when she saw him. "You came back," she squealed. "Of course," he smiled. "I promised I'd check on you." From that day on, he visited often, sometimes bringing food, sometimes toys, and sometimes just sitting with them, listening to Lily's endless stories about her teddy bear named Mr. Buttons and how she wanted to be a doctor one day. Slowly, the cold businessman who had once lived only for work began to laugh again, to smile again, to feel again. When Emily was finally discharged, Richard offered them a ride home. But when he saw where they lived, a crumbling building in a dangerous neighborhood, he couldn't leave them there. "You can't stay here," he said. "It's not safe." Emily looked down, ashamed. "I know, but I can't afford anywhere else." Without thinking twice, he offered, "I have an apartment in one of my buildings. You can stay there until you find something better." Emily hesitated, but the sincerity in his voice convinced her. "Thank you," she whispered. Weeks passed. Richard visited often, sometimes bringing groceries or fixing small things around the house. Lily had started calling him Mr. Richard, but every now and then, she'd slip and call him Daddy. The first time it happened, Emily blushed and tried to scold her, but Richard only smiled. "It's all right," he said gently. "I don't mind." One evening, Emily invited him for dinner to thank him for everything. It was a simple meal, pasta, salad, and laughter. After dinner, Lily proudly handed him a drawing she'd made. "That's me, Mommy, and you," she said happily. "We're a family." Richard stared at the paper for a long time, unable to speak. "You need a wife, and I need a dad," she whispered again, resting her tiny hand on his. That night, as he drove home, those words echoed in his heart louder than ever. For years, he'd built an empire, but all it took was one little girl to remind him of what truly mattered. Months later, at a charity gala his company hosted, Richard spoke about the importance of helping families in need. As he finished his speech, he looked down at the front row. There was Emily, holding Lily in her arms, both smiling proudly at him. When the event ended, Lily ran to him and hugged his leg tightly. "Did I do good, Daddy?" she asked. This time, he didn't correct her. He picked her up, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You did perfect, sweetheart." Emily's eyes filled with tears as she watched them together, her heart swelling with gratitude and love. That night, under the stars, Richard finally told her what he'd been holding back for months. "Emily," he said softly, "you and Lily have given me something I didn't even know I was missing, a home." She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Are you sure you want this life?" she whispered. "It's not perfect." Richard smiled and took her hand. "Perfection is lonely," he said. "Love is messy, real, and beautiful, and that's what I want." And just like that, the man who once sat alone in his limousine, surrounded by silence and shadows, found light again. Sometimes, it only takes a child's innocent words to heal a lifetime of emptiness. For Richard, that single whisper, "You need a wife, and I need a dad," wasn't just a sentence. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a new family, and a new heart finally learning how to love again.